Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein, and thanks for joining me again this week. I hope everyone's had a good week. For those of you that are celebrating Ramadan, I hope that this month brings you both guidance and peace. This is my 57th installment of my weekly virtual office hour address, and people continue to say they appreciate these live stream addresses, hearing from their mayor, and I'll continue to do them through the end of the shelter in place, whenever that's going to be, and probably a lot longer. We've now reached 396 days, almost 400, since the county health order on March 16th, 2020 started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. And since that first declaration, a lot has happened. More happens almost every day. And so a year ago, I thought it'd be a great idea to move my weekly coffee shop hours at Bean Scene on Murphy Avenue to these live stream events. And I haven't missed a Friday since this began. But these virtual office hours are great because they allow me to give you some updates, answer some of your questions, and of course provide some general words of encouragement to a wider audience than I could do at a coffee shop. But it's been actually good from that standpoint of just keeping people up to date on what's really happening and get a little take from their mayor's perspective on what my job is during COVID. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during ever-changing times. I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy, getting out into the nice weather. Please remember to take care of yourself, both mentally and physically. These are difficult times for so many of us. People are finally starting to get the vaccines, but please keep following the county health orders. Do your part to continue to stop the spread of the virus. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Reduce the number of people that you come in contact with. Maintain safe social distance when you're out. Continue to wear your mask, and get tested as you're getting exposed to people, and get your vaccination when it's your time. And pretty much anyone who is almost everyone is eligible, except for children right now, to get that vaccination. So We'll talk a little bit about that more later. But let's go ahead and get started on what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Tuesday, Governor Newsom announced that the state will be fully open on June 15th, and so we'll no longer follow that blueprint for a safer economy, that tiered system of purple, red, orange, yellow. But that plan will ultimately be scrapped, and we'll still be wearing masks, and so there's still, the governor hasn't fully laid out what that new normal looks like, but it's contingent really upon two things. One of which is our vaccine supply, and is our vaccine supply sufficient for all adults to receive their shot? And second is our hospitalization rates remain stable and low. So we'll see where that ultimately goes, and we don't really know. The mask mandate will continue, but it's of course, it's the easiest thing and the non-pharmaceutical, intervention to basically slow the spread of the virus and make sure that people aren't being exposed. But definitely we'll see if we can meet that June 15th date, or what that means as far as the state, or whether or not certain counties meet that. But right now, it's all counties in the state should be at that point on June 15th. And so the governor talked a lot about the vaccine. The vaccines had been administered. It was 20 million doses as of last Tuesday. It's about 24 million now. And of the 20 million, about 4 million had gone to communities that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. So, focusing on equity. And then, ultimately, the governor thought that 30 million Californians will receive one dose by the end of the month, and we'll see whether or not, with the J&J holdup, whether or not being postponed, whether or not that will actually be met. But the goal is 30 million by the end of the month. And then last Tuesday evening, Sunnyvale Council met, and we started with a good discussion on the unhoused issues and what our response has been during COVID-19. And we talked a little bit previously about housing some of the homeless at Fair Oaks Park, but it's been a lot of things, from funding different nonprofits like We Hope, that does showers and facilities at Trinity Church, to the Downtown Streets team, Sunnyvale Community Services. So there are a lot of different organizations that we assist with helping the homeless. And then as far as the main meeting, it started off with special orders of the day. This is the 51st annual Earth Day, which will happen next week, and we'll talk about Earth Day, Earth Week in a little bit, and the 149th Arbor Day celebration. So as far as Earth Week, which starts tomorrow, it's like we planted some trees at Braley Park earlier this week, and so there will be a video of 10 cherry trees that were donated by Sunnyvale's sister city, Iska, Japan. And we also announced a Branch Out Sunnyvale program. So this is basically a program with our urban forest, which is a nonprofit, where residents pay some money and the city pays the remaining funds for that nonprofit to come and plant trees on private land. And Sunnyvale ultimately has been very focused on adding trees into our city. And one of the things that we do is add trees along your park strip. If there's park strips that no longer have a tree for whatever reason, they was cut down or died over the years, and you need one, you can always go to Sunnyvale, Access Sunnyvale, and on our website, and ultimately request that a tree be planted there. But these were trees that were so that provides a certain amount of canopy within the city, and ultimately this program is an attempt to basically increase the number of trees throughout the city, including on private land. And trees, are very positive for the environment. They clean our air. They basically ultimately, clean our air. They're better for water preservation because they keep, water from immediately going into the storm, as opposed to immediately going into the storm drains. They keep them within the ground or within the trees, which is actually positive. They cool our city. The better our urban forest is, the better it is for the city. And of course, they sequester carbon, which is actually really important for greenhouse gases. So all those are positive, and that program we've already had several applicants to that program. So that program is rolling out. If you go to the city website and search for Branch Out Sunnyvale, you'll find information there, and I'll be posting about that later. And then, as far as general business is concerned, we directed staff to come back with an ordinance to reduce the impacts of single-use plastic foodware and condiment containers. And so phase one of that will be an opt-in requirement for online and takeout ordering from food service delivery vendors, restaurants, and all that, which will take effect in September. And then it will later it'll be a requirement. So it's first an opt-in and then a requirement, so that restaurants can kind of work through their current supply of plastics and trying to go to either better alternatives as far as that's concerned. And that requirement will go in place in June of 2023. And then last Wednesday, Lawn Starter, which is an organization I had never heard of, basically ranks Sunnyvale as one of the most relaxed cities, actually the number one most relaxed city in the nation, looking at about 60 different indicators across 200 of the biggest cities. They looked at high blood pressure, length of workday, exercise, healthy eating, all those sorts of things. And for whatever reason, Sunnyvale came out on top. And I know we have a wonderful city, and it's beautiful weather, wonderful parks. It's definitely a highly desirable place to live. I wouldn't have thought us most relaxed, but that being said, we've also and actually the following day we were named the safest city. And I think that's an important thing, is do people feel safe? Do they feel relaxed within their community? But I was actually interviewed by Will Gans of ABC World News. So if you haven't seen that video, it's kind of amusing. But it was good to promote our city. These accolades come around quite often, and the value is kind of, at least the most important value is to highlight what's happening good in your city. And whether or not you're one or top 10, it's always good to kind of relook at what's good and bad in your city to some degree. And then last Wednesday evening, Sunnyvale had its Unity event for Asian American Pacific Islander solidarity. And of course, this was in response to the increasing anti-Asian hate incidents that have happened across the Bay Area and across the country since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And a year ago, we had a resolution against xenophobia. Last month, we had basically a resolution against anti-Asian hate within our communities. But it was important that we actually had a dialogue. And for us, I think, as opposed to just having a rally, although rallies are good, and it was good to have a listening session, talk with some of our leaders and hear from some of our residents. Sunnyvale has an incredible diversity of people that really form an amazing fabric of our city, and that virtual gathering was really good because it allowed for more in-depth discussion. It wasn't just a lot of electeds talking about why anti-Asian hate is wrong, but it was also having some of our leaders reflect on what's happened and their personal experiences being Asian, and also what you can do if you see an anti-Asian hate crime or hate incident, and so talking about some of the details about what the differences are between those. I really commend Jackie Guzman, our deputy city manager, for organizing it and managing the session. I really think that was great from that standpoint. And we had lots of good featured speakers. County Supervisor Otto Lee, who used to be Sunnyvale council member and mayor, Jeff Rosen, our county district attorney, Chief No, of course, our chief of public safety, Rosa Kim from Fremont Union High School, and then we had speakers from the Asian Law Alliance and the Asian Americans for community involvement. So it was good from that standpoint. It's available on YouTube. If you weren't able to attend, or if you missed it, if you missed parts of it, go back and watch that. I really do think it was informative, and it was just very well run to hear back from our community, and having online polls during that meeting, as well as just hearing some of the stories. So I think it was a very good evening, and I think to some degree a master class on how those events can be run. And then on Thursday, last Thursday, Governor Newsom had a press conference where he announced a new $536 million plan to fight and respond to wildfires. And we're slowly getting into wildfire season. It's been a very dry year so far, and we're looking at what the possible drought conditions might be. But the plan would include funding to invest in forest health projects, fire prevention grants, and hiring about 1,400 new firefighters to CAL FIRE. So that was, a positive step forward that the administration and the legislature are looking at to make sure that we actually are prepared for fire safety season. And then on Thursday, Sunnyvale was named the safest city in the U.S. by Smart Asset. And, they looked at, common safety factors, and they do this every year. And we're normally, in the top 10 or even in the top 5, but we were ranked number 1 again this year. And they look at, similarly about 200 of the largest cities, looking at violent crime, property crime, vehicular mortality rates, drug poisoning rate, and the population, percentage of the population engaging in excessive drinking. And looking at those factors, Sunnyvale came out as number 1 as far as being the safest city. And I do think that makes a big difference as far as how people feel about their city. And it is that relationship between public safety and, it's commending our public safety organization, that mixture of every officer being trained in police, fire, and EMS. And it's also our residents caring and giving feedback and, raising issues when there's issues within our community. So yeah, I think, that all those, it's our residents and our public safety working together to make sure our community's safe. And so I give kudos to all of you, as well as all of our officers on what they do in our community. And then, of course, last weekend, there were several anti-Asian hate rallies in nearby cities. On Saturday, there was a rally in Cupertino, and it was good to see so many people turn out, and multiple county leaders speak. And so it was a rally followed by, a march around nearby City Hall in Cupertino. And then on Sunday afternoon, there was a march and rally in Mountain View from the Caltrain station to their City Hall. And it was really, I really liked that rally because it was all led by youth. So there were a few politicians that spoke, but it was mainly led by youth voices, and hearing them speak and their concerns, and what they look forward to, how they want to make sure that they want to see change in their community, in the Bay Area, in the nation. It was really an uplifting event from that standpoint to hear their voices. And, I was really proud to hear some Sunnyvale speakers there also. So, it was good to see some of our youth really speaking out on the change that they would like to see, and how we can all move forward to make a better world. So thank you, and I thank everybody who showed up. And I had a lot of Sunnyvale residents, say that they had seen me there or talk to me about their feelings as far as being at that event. So I think that was really good to talk about the concept that hate and extremism in any form aren't welcome in our community, and we all need to basically stand up and speak out whenever we see any injustice. So thanks to all of you that showed up for those events. And then as far as this week is concerned, on Tuesday, after several incidents, the federal government requested a pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccinations. There were 6 women who have had rare cases of blood clotting, and it's six women out of about 7 million vaccinated in the U.S. With the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and I was one of those. So today is 2 weeks since I got my J&J vaccination, so I'm doing well. But the 6 women had some it's called CVST, so cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. And so if you had the J&J vaccine, it's somewhere between 8 and 13 days that people have started to see signs. And so the signs of CVST include severe headache, blurry vision, fainting or loss of consciousness, weakness, sensory changes, seizures, abdominal pain, leg pain, difficulty breathing, or shortness of breath. If you have any of those, definitely contact your doctor. And as soon as they show up, our county quickly stopped distribution of J&J, and all the states around the country have stopped distribution of J&J at this point. So as they continue to investigate and look at what those incidences are. And then on Tuesday of this week, it was actually really good from a county standpoint that the public health officials announced that they're receiving tens of thousands additional COVID-19 vaccine doses from the federal government, and that allocation comes as at the same time as we were halting J&J, so we're going to have to reduce the number of vaccines, J&J vaccines that we're distributing. But it's been a long time of advocacy that we've had for a long, for a lot of weeks now. This will actually allow us to meet our vaccination goal of vaccinating about 200,000 residents per week within the county. And so we worked up to set up that infrastructure. It's just we haven't had those vaccines. And so the other thing that the county did was decided to move that 16 years age and older earlier by 2 days. So up until 2 weeks ago, April 1st, it was everyone 50 years of age and older was eligible to get the vaccine. And then on the 15th, yesterday, from a state standpoint, that's when everyone 16 years and older would be eligible. But because of the additional vaccines that we're receiving, the county decided to move that up by 2 days, so that on Tuesday, everyone 16 years of age and older were allowed to get the vaccine. And there's been lots of demand for vaccines, but behind the scenes for the last month, especially when the state moved to kind of an equity level, and it was all based upon zip codes and not census tracts, there's been a lot of federal advocacy, and thanks to Congress members Zoe Lofgren, Ro Khanna, Anna Eshoo, Nancy Pelosi, for all their hard work behind the scenes, and this means about an additional 250,000 doses of Pfizer, as well as another 40,000 or so doses of Moderna. And from the state, we've only been getting about 50 to 70,000 doses per week, and so this will actually give a good influx so that we can actually do a lot more of the mobile clinics that we have. We have 5 mobile vaccination clinics, but they actually have only been going to 1 or 2 places a week, mainly because with our fixed locations at the county fairgrounds, at Levi Stadium, there wasn't really enough vaccines to make those mobile vaccine clinics viable. And so if you want to get signed up, and I know it's hard to get back appointments still, but they're continued to opening up. But you can do that through sccfreevax.org or use the 211 211 system. So if you call 211, and depending upon your language, it deals with English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, as well as Tagalog. And so from that standpoint, you can hopefully get your appointment and then get vaccinated. So it was really good that after weeks and months of advocacy, we finally got additional vaccines from the federal government. So hopefully get your shot if you can. And then on Tuesday of this week, um, of Tuesday afternoon, Sunnyvale Public Library opened, and so it's finally open for in-building services. And there were a lot of happy residents, as far as I heard, standing in line waiting to get in. And the current hours are now Tuesdays through Saturdays, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. So things have changed a little bit. It's please don't visit, of course, if you're showing any symptoms of COVID-19. And the number of people allowed in the building are limited to 50, and so staff will be at the front door uh, monitoring the number of occupants at any given time. And please, if you're going, uh, spend a limited amount of time there. Please, a maximum of 30 minutes. All people are required to wear masks at all time, maintain safe social distancing. There's hand sanitizer throughout the building, so as you're touching surfaces and all that, you can feel a little bit safer. And then, the other thing has changed is to provide more space for social distancing and making sure that people aren't spending tons of time there. All tables and chairs have been removed, and the technology center, PCs, scanners, printers are not available currently to the public. But I heard talk to several librarians. We have plexiglass barriers between the librarians and the residents if you're checking in books or checking out books. And so it's a lot safer, but it was good to be inside, kind of browse the stacks and be a little bit more hands-on with some of the books. We still have all of our digital and remote access to our catalogs is available, online music and online books, audio books. But for those of you that want to go back to the library, it's now open. And then on Thursday, Governor Newsom had a press conference. One of the things, of course, is he signed the bill for the half a billion dollars for fire that I talked about previously. He, of course, talked about that now all residents within the state 16 years of age and older are now eligible to get the vaccine. And he also talked a little bit about schools. And so, Governor Newsom announced that all California schools should reopen when for in-person school learning in the new year, in the fall. And with appropriate guidelines and everything's but it's an expectation and not a mandate. And so that's one of the things that a lot of parents are still worried about on their local school districts. And Newsom proposed extending the school year, and so we'll see where that goes. He basically said, who says that you have to end the school year on June 1st or June 15th? A lot of that has to do with our teachers and the unions, and wanting a break. There's also when does summer school start? So there are a lot of things as far as that's concerned, but we'll see where that goes. But right now, it's everyone should be back in school in the fall. And I know a lot of our schools that went to hybrid learning, and next week I think all schools are in some sort of form of in person. So, but definitely Newsom made it clear that he will not order classrooms to reopen, but he's been dangling a lot of financial incentives to, and he prioritized vaccines for educators. He also worked with a legislator to say schools that do reopen have possibility of other financial incentive. So we'll see where that goes as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our numbers as far as testing, hospitalization, and vaccinations. Nationally, cases are a little on the rise, and around the world are definitely surging. But from a national standpoint, we've now surpassed 31.2 million cases. That's up about 500,000 cases in the last week. So that's been up a little bit from the week before of, I think, about 400,000. And nationally, we've now surpassed 198 million vaccines administered. And we've also surpassed about 561,000 deaths related to COVID-19. So it's still, the virus is still spreading, and people are being directly affected by that. And as far as California, we've had 3.6 million positive cases, and that's only going up about 2,000 cases a day now, and we're one of the states with the lowest new positive cases as far as that's concerned. And from a state standpoint, we've had more than 59,000 fatalities. But on a positive note, of course, we've had over 24 million vaccines administered, and that's about just 3 million in the last week. So we've actually have a large uptick in the number of people that have been vaccinated. And then as far as vaccines per state, we're still doing okay. We're from residents with at least one dose, we're doing far better. We keep moving up as far as that's concerned. So we're about number 13. We were number 18 with about 41% of our residents that are eligible have their first dose. And then we're still about a little bit later on like number 36. So we're still at the number 36 on states with residents that are fully vaccinated. So give it time, another month or so, and those numbers, at least from our state, should go up dramatically. And as far as the number of cases in the county, the cumulative confirmed cases is still kind of goes up. It was 116,000, almost 117,000 this past we've now is from a county standpoint, and that's up from more than 1,000 a week ago, which we've been slowly ticking up. We were 800 or 700. We've been 1,000 for the last 2 weeks, and then we've had we just surpassed 2,000 deaths. So we've had 208 2008 deaths in the county, 30 more in the last week. So hospitalizations are still around 100, 102. So people are still, being affected by COVID. So definitely, do what you can to prevent that virus. 482,000 people in the county have been vaccinated, and 30% have completed their vaccination. So are fully vaccinated. So looking fairly good from a city standpoint. San Jose is still the largest number of positive cases. They went up about 700 this past week, which is also upticking. They've had about 500 for the last month, so they're at 76,000 cases of positive cases of COVID-19. And Sunnyvale, we went up about 60 again this week, so we're always about 50 or 60 for the last month, and we're at 5,400 cases. And I continue to do a lot of advocating, on our city's behalf, on your behalf. At the county level, we continue our discussions with county health and the county supervisors. As for testing, the mobile pop-up van continues to be at Murphy Park on the second and fourth Monday. So they were here this past Monday from 9:30 to 4. And please continue to get tested. We're starting to see testing drop. As people think, oh, I'm vaccinated, I don't need to get tested. If you're being exposed, it's in your best interest to go ahead and get tested intermittently, because as much as vaccines are reduce the chance that you will be getting COVID-19, it doesn't reduce those chances to zero. Regardless of what vaccine you get, it's important that you still are safe, wear your mask, and get tested intermittently just to make sure that you're that you know that you've been if you've conceivably been exposed. And of course that testing, the testing mobile van will be back here on April 26th. And so you can go to sccfreetest.org and sign up there. And then as far as vaccinations, the county mobile vaccination clinic was at Columbia Neighborhood Center last Wednesday, and they delivered 500 doses to those that needed them. Hopefully they'll be back, relatively soon. So we'll and it is limited. If you go to sccfreevax.org, you can see all the places within the county that you can go and get vaccinated. El Camino Health and LinkedIn have a clinic near Maud and Mary, and then a lot of different providers, different healthcare providers are providing vaccines. And of course, Levi's Stadium yesterday had the most vaccines given in a single day. Earlier this week, the most vaccines given in a single day. So, residents 16 years and older are eligible to get their vaccine. You just need to go to sccfreevax.org. I know that there's a lot of people trying, and it's not easy, but definitely what you can do. Please please do what you can to keep trying, get your vaccine when you can. So anyway, let's go ahead and announce some upcoming events. So tomorrow morning is the spring plant sale at Charles Street Gardens, and I don't know if many of you know about our community gardens. So on basically Charles and Olive Avenues, it was Sunnyvale's first community gardens. It was started about 15 years ago. I was one of the founding members as far as that's concerned, and helped build some of the beds that are there. And it hasn't been the same since COVID began. It's been a lot more limited. There were restrictions on community gardening, but their spring plant sale will be happening tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you get a chance, drop by. For all those that are planting in their back gardens, or drop by and take a look at the garden. I'm assuming that will, the kind of group gardening and reserving your plots will slowly increase over the next, as people get their vaccines and things start to open up. Tomorrow is also extra dump day at the Smart Station, and I was ran by, so on my long Sunday run, I ran through Moffett Park and saw the long line of people waiting to do the additional dumping at the Smart Station. But that happens again tomorrow for those of you that didn't know. Tomorrow begins Earth Week, and so there's lots of events, and it's a big virtual celebration this year. And as far as this year's theme, it's Gourmet Earth Week, and so it's more of a focus on food, growing food, cooking food, eating, composting, food cycling, all of that. So you can go to bit.ly/Gourmet Earth Week, all lowercase, to find out more information. But there's a youth climate action trivia tomorrow, April 17th, and then on Sunday, if you want to watch the mayor cook in his kitchen, you can join at 4 p.m. on Sunday for a live event. So there's a cooking competition on induction burners that will basically between the mayor and several staff members to see who can create kind of the tastiest plant-forward meal. So that's on Sunday afternoon starting at 4 p.m. And then there's other speakers. So there's Dr. Zimmerman will be talking about the impact solutions and what you can do as far as climate impact. Chef Tony from Goombas will be teaching the kids how to make their own pizzas on the 19th. And there's also some talks on growing your food, composting, and learning more about electric vehicles and all that. So definitely, if you get a chance, try to take part in Earth Week. And as far as uh, upcoming council meetings, next Tuesday's council meeting, that'll be the 20th. It'll start at 6 p.m. with a study session on the Tasman Drive Complete Streets corridor study, which has been done by VTA. So we'll see the results of that study and kind of talking about what VTA is suggesting for complete streets. And then there will be several special orders of the day for Asian American Heritage Month, Affordable Housing Month, and of course it's April is Earthquake Preparedness Month. So if you, and especially for the last one, please kind of go through and evaluate, how to be prepared for an earthquake. We're dealing with COVID's an emergency that doesn't really have an endpoint, but you can be prepared for earthquakes and figuring out what you can do. And then as far as the general meeting on Tuesday, we'll be discussing our housing strategy update and discuss our mobile home memorandum of understanding as far as the ongoing effort between the residents and the landlords at the different mobile home communities. So Sunnyvale has about 400 acres by charter, 400 acres of mobile home community, and it's figuring out how to give them appropriate expectations on rent increases and what happens when someone moves out, and it's kind of that pass-through cost. So those have been ongoing discussions, and so we'll be discussing about the latest update on how those negotiations have been going. And then we're also, from a council standpoint, being designated a project alternative for the Mary Avenue overcrossing. And so, that's part of the EIR project. So from an EIR standpoint, we need to choose one of the 5 different proposals, either no project, bike and ped only, bike and ped with shuttles, bike and ped with 2 lanes of traffic, or bike and ped with 4 lanes of traffic. So we'll be going through and picking a proposed, a selected alternative. That being said, all 5 of those will be studied as far as that EIR. So it'll be more of a complete EIR than what's normally done. And then we're also about a month away from our all-day budget session. So May 20th is when the proposed 2021, 2022 budget comes back to council. And so we'll see that proposed budget and figuring out, we got a little preview a few weeks ago from a staff standpoint, from our finance department standpoint, on some of the difficulties on this upcoming year's budget. But we'll see where things go as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. I had one question of why have they cut down all the trees in front of City Hall? So, ultimately they've actually been moving lots of trees. So it's part of the Civic Center modernization project, phase 1. So our new City Hall is going to be built basically between where the existing City Hall is and Olive Avenue. And a lot of the trees in front of that have actually been moved to other locations on the city campus. Right now there's a big hole there dug for underground parking below the new City Hall. So all those efforts have kind of started up, and you've seen a lot of trees. So there were two trees that were moved from in front of City Hall to next to All American Way and Matilda, and the removal of those trees, each of those weighed about 250,000 pounds. So it was a big effort to try to maintain as many trees as possible there. Satish asked, a local street light is out and I'm worried about pedestrian safety. Where do I report it? So there's Access Sunnyvale is a ticketing system program. And if you go to sunnyvale.ca.gov, you'll see Access Sunnyvale in the upper right-hand corner. And you can report, issues about, street lights in this case, but if you see, cracked sidewalks, a signal that's not working, lots of other issues around the city, that's where you go to report, traffic signal problems, stoplights, whatever they might be. And I always, I go on morning runs around the city, and usually at least 2 or 3 days a week I come back and end up opening several of those items. Josh asked, will there be an art and wine festival this year? And I spoke at a chamber event on Wednesday of this week and kind of talked about what it's like being mayor over the last year. But part of that, from a chamber standpoint, is yes, there will be an event. It'll be a little bit smaller than usual, but it's planned for the weekend of October 2nd and October 3rd. So, as you know, mark your calendars as far as that's concerned. Dave asked, is there an estimated time on completion for the Fair Oaks overpass? With traffic picking up lately, has been jammed during peak times. So I want to tell you that I did give you the wrong date previously. So initially, there's a tracking on the city website of kind of the top 30 projects, which the Fair Oaks overpass is one of them. But it was supposed to be opening in winter of 2021, or finished construction winter of 2021. That should have actually been last quarter. And this is always the question of from the update to the mayor, it was listing as winter of 2021, which to me, winter doesn't start until December. So I normally think of January and February as winter. It won't be until the third quarter of this year that the Fair Oaks overpass will be completed. So sorry, Dave, for that bad information previously. Ultimately, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. The traffic, I was surprised, going through there last week, that it was, ultimately looking like there was a lot more work to get done to add a pedestrian bridge over Fair Oaks and get all that done in just a month or two. So yes, it's going to take another 6 months or so before that's starting to really open up to normal levels. Teresa asked, when will lawn bowling greens reopen at Murphy Park? I think this is allowed under orange tier, and yes, it is allowed under orange tier. I did bring that up with staff. Senior Center staff met last week with volunteers from the Sunnyvale Lawn Bowl to go over kind of the required protocols and what's really needed to reopen. And Lawn Bowls Bocce reopened this past Wednesday, so April 14th, so just a few days ago. And the bowling greens will be open on Wednesdays from 12:30 to 2:30 by reservation only, but we're starting to see those open up and people are able to do lawn bowling again. John asked, what's the best way to request the Murphy Street non-vehicle status be kept moving forward? Who can I talk to? Should a resolution be introduced? What needs to be done? So I've had, ongoing discussions. Definitely, Murphy Avenue closed only to pedestrians has been, I think, a real gem as far as a positive thing that come out of COVID. We've talked about it for many years, but this is, the last 8 months or so has forced kind of a trial period with the businesses. Definitely keep telling your businesses that you'd like it, how much that ultimately feeds into the Sunnyvale Downtown Association requesting that from City Council. I had some discussions with the City Attorney this week on how we basically close that public right of way to only pedestrians. So it is in the process, but definitely tell the Downtown Association, and of course tell your businesses. That's the most important thing. And then Vicky asked, how do you accommodate seniors who don't have computers and can't see your live streams? And that was a great question. I reached out to KMVT, our Channel 15 public access channel, and they have started showing this Friday virtual office hour address every Saturday night at 7 p.m. So tell your friends and neighbors if they don't get a chance to watch this, that they can always watch it on KMVT at a later time. And then a question on how can I volunteer with the city? And so, one of the best things you can do is our Sunnyvale boards and commissions. And we have a wide variety of boards and commissions that have a lot of different topics to cover, but those boards and commissions make a certain amount of decisions and also make some recommendations to city council, do a community outreach. And so it's really good for if you want to volunteer and give back to the city. It's a fantastic way to kind of get more involved. So recruitment's currently underway for about 10 different about 10 different boards and commissions that we have: Art Commission, Bicycle Pedestrian and Advocacy, Bicycle Pedestrian and Advisory Commission, Board of Building Code Appeals, the Board of Library Trustees, Heritage Preservation, Housing and Human Services Commission, Parks and Rec, Personnel, Planning Commission, and Sustainability Commission. The applications are due 2 weeks from today, Friday, April 30th at 5 p.m. So all you need to do is go to the city website and search for boards and commissions to get that application. So definitely, I think it's very worthwhile and helps people to get involved. That's how I ended up getting involved with the city. I applied to the BPAC and ended up not getting appointed there. And then about a year later, got on the Planning Commission, and that was my first involvement with actually being, making recommendations to City Council. Let's go ahead and wrap up. It's getting a little late. Thanks for joining me again this week. And as always, I'm just really proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic. Life continues to be difficult for a lot of us. New issues come up, but your actions really do make a difference. Wear your mask, get your vaccine when it's your time. This is really important in order to get back to normal. These are the best things we can do. But I'm really proud to see people, helping others, especially during trying times, whether or not that's providing free items in front of their house, giving away food, giving away, fruit that they picked from their tree. But it's that sharing and community building that's really been a great thing to see and made me proud of our community. If you're out on a walk, wave, say hello from a safe social distance. People still miss that safe interaction, but from a certain standpoint, as people get vaccinated, we'll start seeing people out meeting people and getting together a lot more often. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We'll get through this together. So thanks for listening. To everyone, please, of course, wear your mask, get vaccinated, stay safe, and of course, have a great week. Okay? Take care. Goodbye.